Friends and families gather Thursday at the Coronado to celebrate more than 300 new citizens during a special naturalization ceremony.
Yeah, these ceremonies are held at notable locations to celebrate the hard work of the new citizens and the conclusion of their journeys as immigrants. The candidates were from 63 countries, including Mexico, the Philippines, and Poland.
The first naturalization ceremony that I did was one of the first things I did as a member of Congress. I remember writing up my remarks and then getting up there on stage and closing the book because I wrote the remarks before I could feel it. And so today it's about talking about how we feel.